Howdy YouTube family, it's Bolt CRNA coming to you back from the dead with another day's topic. I know I've been gone like 2 months, but I've finally finished summer semester and survived it, barely, and I'm ready to talk to you guys about today's topic, which will be about what the first year of a DNP program for CRNA school is like. I know a lot of people wonder about that. I wondered about it myself before I got in, so I figure I can give you guys the inside scoop. Let's get into it. All right, I need to preface this by letting you know that I'm in a front-loaded DNP program. So what that means, for those of you who don't know, is there's two different styles of CRNA schools. You can do integrated or front-loaded. Front-loaded means they're going to do a whole lot of your academic classroom work in advance, and you're just going to pound that for a little while, and then they'll start your clinicals after you've hit a certain amount of time. In DNP programs, it's usually about a year. Usually you do about a year of like really intense classroom work with no clinicals, just classroom stuff. Just, I guess, to kind of teach you all the theory and stuff behind what you're doing and the science behind what you're doing, and then let you start practicing it in the second and third year. Integrated program means that they throw you into clinicals right away, pretty much. Like in the first maybe 4 to 6 weeks of being in CRNA school, you might be in the OR already kind of like doing some of the practice stuff, which in that case, you've of course 4 to 6 weeks in, you're not going to have a whole lot of foundational knowledge about anesthesia or about the sciences that are kind of related to anesthesia. So you kind of like learn as you go. You do both at the same time. A lot of master's programs are integrated, and a lot of that is because you are expected to get done in 2 years or 2.5 years. So there's not really any way to do very much front-loaded with a master's program, because if you didn't do clinicals for your first year, then what are you doing clinicals for 1 year and getting out and being a CRNA? That's not going to meet the requirements to take boards for the number of clinical hours you need. So for master's programs, they kind of have to be integrated. A lot of DNPs, most DNPs actually, are front-loaded. And after the year 2021, if you're going to start CRNA school as a new student, you have to be in a doctorate program. So some of this information should be applicable to you if you're not already in CRNA school and you're looking to do it in the future. Your program will probably be front-loaded. It will probably be a DNP, and it should be pretty similar curriculum to what I'm going to tell you I had with mine. So you guys might have seen that I had a previous video last year, actually, when I finished first semester. Me and a couple of my classmates talked about first semester and what it was like. I'm going to give you a quick Cliff Notes version of that now, because it's a little different in retrospect a year later, looking back on first year, than when you had just finished it and it's still fresh on your mind and you didn't have perspective of the rest of the year to know what first year really was like. So first year is a lot of easing you into the program. At least in my program, they kind of take it easier on you. That doesn't mean it was easy at all. It's still very busy and very time consuming, but in general, it wasn't that bad. We did an ethics and theology course that required weekly research and APA writing papers. That was kind of time consuming, but not academically difficult. We did a statistics course, which could be academically difficult unless you're just really good with chi-squared tests and all kinds of, I can't even remember them off the top of my head, but it was you had to get used to the SPSS software, and you had to get really comfortable with kind of advanced statistics and stuff. So that took a little bit of time. Then we had Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2, which I talked about extensively in that video from last year, about the difficulties of it, which it is. It's, you take Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2 in undergrad, but they never go nearly as deep as you're going to go in this class in grad school. And it's a lot more of critical thinking about the physiology and things that are happening. It's not sheer memorization like in undergrad. It's just to memorize all the muscles and memorize all the bones and memorize, some basic physiology, but nothing too complex. But I found that it was mostly physiology that we had to learn in this program for A&P 1 and 2. And it was not simple physiology. It was very complex physiology. So that was probably our hardest class in first semester. And then we also took health assessment, which was just teaching you basic how to do pre-op anesthesia assessments, really simple stuff. Cranial assessments, which you learned how to do the 12 cranial nerve assessment in undergrad, but it's keeping you on your toes again, how to do the motor and sensory of the olfactory and things like that. And then we took a professional aspects course, which mostly was fun because it finally started teaching you stuff about the real life of anesthesia. You learn kind of the laws behind anesthesia. You learn the origins of the Civil War when you began as a CR, when that degree began as a CRNA. You learn about malpractice lawsuits, and you have a lawyer come in and he talked to us about malpractice and different types of ways that you can get sued as a CRNA or anesthesia provider in general. We talked about independent practice and how a lot of CRNAs are moving towards independent practice and different laws that are opt-out states or different states that have opt-out laws in them so that you can practice without any physician supervision. So there's a lot of that topics in there. That was mostly a fun course. Of course, an APA-style paper was required. In anything that they're going to let you have fun in that's not massively hard academically, there will be a paper you will have to write about. So second semester begins in January for us, or late January, and they started us off immediately with organic chemistry, which a lot of you have probably taken organic chemistry in undergrad. So this course will mostly be a refresher. It might be adding a little bit on to what you learned in undergrad, but it's not going to be that much harder. Essentially, they want you to be very good at organic chemistry and chemistry in general because they're prepping you for where you're about to get into even more difficult courses that are in relation to anesthesia and specific. And there's lots of kind of chemistry and physiology and stuff going on in the body, and you have to know it, like master it pretty much. So you have to know these concepts of organic chemistry to be able to apply it to these things. So you get that out of the way. Then you start your first real dedicated research course, which it's titled research, and essentially there every week you have quizzes on qualitative articles, and you have to dissect out randomized controlled trials and double-blind studies and things like that. Every week you're going to have to find and research up articles and just become. They're trying to get you used to researching and producing research because you're going to have to do a giant research project to graduate. And then when you get out with your doctorate, you're expected to be a pretty proficient, if not expert, researcher. So they expect you to be honing that muscle at this point. So it can be time consuming, but academically nowhere near as hard as some of your science classes. Another class that's not hard academically but can be time consuming is a technology course that we had to take, which sounds simple, sounds easy, technology, great, everyone loves, their iPhones and their computers. This was not fun in that sense. It was, again, research. Every week it was researching on how electronic medical records can improve patient outcomes through some, algorithm, and you have to find 3 articles on that, and you have to write an APA paper about it every week, and then there's quizzes, and then there's group assignments where you have to use this Zoom. It's called Zoom, is some kind of software program where you teleconference in together, and you have to present like a group presentation using this software when you're in all of you are in different locations, and you assimilate the data together. So anyway, it can be challenging, and sometimes would consume an entire day of your time to get some of these projects done. Along with research, the research course, we had to do a research symposium, which it was months of preparation for this, and you had to do it in a giant poster board, and you had to go to a symposium with a bunch of other people presenting their research, and you had to present it to other scholarly doctoral people who are going to question you about your research and your methodology, and you're going to have to create abstracts and all kinds of stuff. So that was very time consuming too, but academically not difficult, just time consuming. Now, when you get into the academically difficult content, that's in spring semester when you finally hit pharmacology, which for us, the pharmacology was not specific anesthesia pharmacology, although it was just for CRNAs. It was kind of like a general pharmacology. We learned antibiotics, which a lot of this you learn in undergrad, but I'm just telling you, as in nursing school, you learn a lot of this stuff, but they're going to break this down on a level much deeper than what you had to learn it in undergrad. And you're going to learn it like a provider who maybe would be prescribing this medication. You have to know the milligrams per kilogram of this patient type, and you have to know the IV dosage versus, PO, and you have to know pretty much the outcomes of if you give it this way, what could possibly happen to the patient. They're training you and teaching you these meds because you're expected at this level to be able to give these things and do these things and not need anybody else's backup who can, tell you, oh, this is right or this is wrong or whatever. You're expected to be a master at this stuff now. Although with antibiotics, you give a lot of that kind of stuff, but the surgeon's going to be the one prescribing that on all these cases. They prescribe it, but you're expected to know it as if you needed to prescribe it and the surgeon wasn't there. They expect you to know beta-2 agonists, that you have to memorize your inhalers and long-term corticosteroids, and you have to memorize psych meds. You have to learn, of course, your cardiac meds, which are important. Those actually are very applicable to anesthesia. But essentially, you're going to learn the whole breadth of kind of meds. We didn't really study much chemotherapy or anything like that, but you're going to spend in that class a lot of just general knowledge of meds and stuff, because your patients may be on them pre-op, they might be on them post-op, and you have to kind of know what to expect with these kind of meds. The next difficult class that we took in spring semester is Pathophysiology, which again, this is a course you take in nursing school, but this class in CRNA school is going to be, again, in the next level. It's going to be pathophys that's broken down onto a very microcellular level. You're going to start memorizing, proto-oncogenes and cancer cell research, and you're going to start learning about SCN5, I think, if I recall, is it SCN5A, with genetic mutations with Brugada syndrome and MYH7. This is me trying to recall this information from last year. Yeah, I think it's MYH, myosin heavy chain, something with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And you're going to memorize 200 different genetic mutations and everything that's going to go along with those. And you're going to be thinking to yourself, why on earth am I memorizing all of these genes and all of this stuff that will have nothing to do with anesthesia? Well, you're expected to learn it, and I don't know, maybe some of it might be on boards, maybe not, maybe it's just to enrich your knowledge, but you will spend a lot of time memorizing stuff in pathophys that, because your patients might have, what if your patient has Alzheimer's? Well, maybe it's not that important to know about hyperphosphorylation of tau, but they're going to expect you to know it, so just saddle up for that. So it's going to be next level kind of pathophys, and you're not probably going to like it. I mean, you'll like the information if you like healthcare and you like knowledge, but you're going to be slammed with so much that you're doing that you're going to be stressed. So just sign up for it, be ready for it. If you're coming to CRNA school, be prepared for learning a lot of stuff way beyond anesthesia, way more than what you need to provide basic anesthesia care to somebody, and that's anesthesia school. All right, in the next class, which is the last one we took in spring semester, this is actually the most difficult class. This was called Basics of Anesthesia. And in nursing school, if you went through nursing school, this is similar. This is like a similar analogy to how you took foundations of nursing in first semester of school as a nurse. It's a class that a lot of people failed out of in my program. I know a lot of other people struggled in this class. And it's kind of simple stuff, because when you look back as an experienced nurse, it seems like basic, dumb stuff that everyone should have done very easily on. But when you're starting the information for the first time, it's hard. And there were a lot of people who struggled in that class. I struggled in that class. And it's because anesthesia is a new language. As a nurse, you don't know any of this stuff yet. No one who hasn't learned anesthesia yet knows this stuff. So anyway, you're learning Mallampati's, and you're learning thyromental distance and difficult intubation assessment techniques, and you're learning the recurrent laryngeal nerve and which structures it runs between in the chest, and and what kind of surgeries could they be doing that could cause damage to the left recurrent laryngeal nerve, which could cause hoarseness, and you're studying the cricothyroid muscle, which is a branch, which is innervated by the superior laryngeal nerve, external branch of. So it's just, it's a lot of that kind of stuff. You're going to study if a patient has been NPO for 6 hours and is 70 kilograms and is a female getting a hysterectomy and has had 200 milliliters of blood loss, calculate with all this information exactly how much hourly fluid you're going to give them, and then the second and third and fourth hour, how much you're going to give them to replace and stuff. And there's all these algorithms and numbers that you'll have to memorize and stuff. You're going to have to memorize the anesthesia machine. You're going to have to know from the outlet in the wall that plugs in to the the circle system and to it going through the scavenging system back outside of the room again. You're going to have to know every single little component, valve, regulator, check valve, everything that you can, which there's like 100 pieces. You're going to memorize every single one of them, exactly which one does which. You're going to memorize if your end tidal CO2 levels start doing this number and they start widening at a certain angle, you have to know exactly what's happening on your patient. If maybe it's a machine malfunction, you have to start identifying all of these things and being able to do your machine check, which is very important as a CRNA, to walk into a room before surgery and be able to assess this super complex machine and know everything that's going on in it and know how to fix it if something's wrong. So that takes a lot of time, and you're even going to have to know the PSI pressure in the intermediate system of the anesthesia machine, how much PSI pressure can be allowed in that system and stuff. So it's very overwhelming, and it's a very difficult course. In retrospect, now that I've gone through more difficult anesthesia courses, I think maybe it wasn't quite as hard of information, but you're going to be overwhelmed by it. And when you add on all the other classes I just listed that you're also juggling, it makes it difficult to space out time for this stuff. So we actually lost two people. Two people failed out in that class in spring semester, and that was the first time we lost some people. And so they tried really hard, and that class got them. And I've heard from other people in different programs that class is usually one that gets people when you first start in the really hard anesthesia information. So anyway, that's one to not take lightly. And lastly, we begin our summer semester, which in my program specifically is known as the semester from hell. It's the most difficult semester, and it's because they slam you with a ton of information trying to prepare you really, really well before you start clinicals in August or early September. They try and prepare you with tons of anesthesia information so that you can walk in and be pretty knowledgeable about anesthesia before you actually start doing things on patients. And they do this in 2.5 months. You begin the first day of June, and then you end, which we ended today, which is the 18th of August, correct? Yeah, today's the 18th of August. So it's about 2.5 months, and it's constant, nonstop, every day, all day. You are either going to be on campus for 8-hour stretches of a day, just lecture, hour after hour after hour of hardcore information, or you're going to take that information home and you're going to study all day and all night, and then the next morning you'll get up and you'll come back and do it again. Then you'll have lab days where you've got to come and do simulation labs and stuff. So you're just constantly, it's nonstop. Then you finally get to the weekend, and you're going to just study the entire weekend, everything that you've been learning that week, because that next Monday, you're going to have a massive exam on what they taught you the week before. So it's just constant. It's like learning, test, learning, test, learning, test. And it wears a lot of people down, and the information's very hard too. So let me tell you a little bit about the information we learned. We did a Principles of Anesthesia course, which is kind of like a continuation of that course we had in the spring, where you learned about the anesthesia machine and those kind of basic concepts. But now they're teaching you more advanced concepts of anesthesia. Now you're learning spinals and epidurals. You're learning brachial plexus blocks and pretty much all the other blocks. Any block you can think of. You're learning retrobulbar blocks, even though ophthalmologists do those themselves. But you're going to learn them, how to do them too. I guess just in case they forgot how to do it. You're going to learn PA catheter insertions, central line insertions. What else did we learn? Oh yeah, difficult intubations, complex airway problems, Kliker-Fleisch syndrome, Treacher-Collins syndrome. I'm trying to think of some of these syndromes that we had to learn. That trisomy 21, I think, disorders that cause difficult airways and stuff. So there's all kinds of advanced things that you learn in this class that we just finished actually. So anyway, that one's a hard one. It's very time consuming. You'll have a lot of lab days where you have to come in and actually do these things on cadavers or simulation labs and stuff, so that they know that you kind of have an idea of how to set up a central line kit and stuff, so that you don't step off into clinical having no idea how to put on a sterile gown and gloves or anything like that yet. We also took a pharmacology, anesthesia pharmacology class, and it's kind of a continuation of the pharmacology that we took in the springtime, except now it's specific to anesthesia meds. So you're learning about Charles' law and Boyle's law and Pousseau's and Graham's law and all these different types of gas laws and things like that that will affect your SIVO and your DES and your ISO, and you're learning about how halothane used to have a lot of cardiac effects and nobody gives it anymore, and you learn enflurane, and you learn about how nitrous oxide can't ever reach a MAC because it takes 105% to reach a MAC, so you can't give it alone to reach a MAC on a patient. You learn what a MAC is. You learn blood gas solubility and oil gas solubility and Meyer-Overton's rule, and you learn about pH of your local anesthetics and pKa of prilocaine, and how much of your prilocaine after you inject it into the body's pH of 7.4 is going to end up unionized versus ionized, and fetal trapping syndrome that goes on with ionized and unionized forms, and you learn about opioids and mu2 receptors and how it's mostly responsible for respiratory depression, and you learn about how GABA and how propofol works on it, and how thiopental interacts in the body, and you learn about droperidol and what they call chemical handcuffs, and just all kinds of interesting stuff. Ketamine, which is NMDA receptors, and just lots of stuff. We just finished this course, so it's like my brain is firing all kinds of ways. Not that I've mastered this in any kind of way, but I have definitely studied in a massive amount of time with this stuff. And you'll be that same way too. If you manage to pass the class, you will definitely be firing on all cylinders with this crazy stuff. You learn your neuromuscular blockers in that class, which are really complicated. You learn about why succinylcholine will have a different kind of train of 4 response over vecuronium, and which situations that you would use cisatracurium in, or atracurium, or all this different stuff. There's lots. I could talk to you for hours on the content that you would learn in the summer semester with us. And in all the programs, in any program you're going to go into, you will learn all of this stuff. It might be in a little bit in the spring and a little bit in the summer. They might space it out to where you learn some of it in the fall. You might do clinicals at the same time while they're kind of teaching you little bits of this, but all this content will be covered in your CRNA program so that you'll be ready to take boards. So another anesthesia course that we took in the summer that gave people a hard time was Concepts of Anesthesia, I think it was called. And essentially what it is it's like you go through pathophys again, except now you're applying anesthesia to the pathophys. So you're saying your patient has sickle cell disease. These are the ways that they're going to present. This is kind of how you're going to see it in the OR. These are the types of meds you're going to want to give. These are the ones you don't want to give. These are some treatments you're looking to do. And you're going to cover a massive amount of disease processes and things that are happening to your patients, and which types of meds you're going to do. And for our testing purposes, it was mostly essay style, because the teacher would say, so your patient has sarcoidosis, or they have restrictive cardiomyopathy. Which meds will you give? Which ones will you not? Tell me from start to finish in your case how you're going to handle this patient. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. And some of them could be very complicated with like liver transplants and things like that. You start realizing how complex the physiology of the body goes along with this pathophys. So and how your medicines will interact with the body and change what's happening, and how you can help them and how you can harm them with what you're giving. So that one was an interesting one. It was time consuming and difficult because it takes a lot of studying. And the last course of the summer was gross anatomy. Now that course, you took A&P 1 and 2, you took A&P in undergrad, you took pathophys, you've done all this stuff. How much more is there to learn? Well, you will, in that class, you will just spend hours sitting in lecture learning the branches off the splenic artery and where they're going. You're going to learn about the pectinate muscle in the heart. You're going to learn the sella turcica is the Turkish saddle that the pituitary gland sits within in the, I think it's sphenoid bone. Sorry, Dr. Mahan, I'm trying to remember your stuff. Anyway, there's just a lot. You're going to learn so much. Pretty much if there's something in your body, you will have memorized it and know what it's connected to and what it's superior to and what it's anterior to. And, if you coronally do a cut, what aspect you're going to look at it from the side. There's just tons of stuff that you will learn in that class. And then there's a lecture portion, which was 3 hours of lecture every week. And then there was also the lab portion, which was 4 hours every week. And that's human dissection pretty much. So that we all got a cadaver at the beginning of the semester. And they put a couple of us together for each body. And so that was like your couple people that you were grouped with, and you would dissect the body with your group, and you would pretty much go from head to toe and dissect out everything in the whole body down to the spine. You remove the spine and you look at the nervous system. But really, what was most interesting to me, even though we had to learn everything, ligaments to the ovaries and things like that aren't necessary for CRNAs at all, but what was really interesting to me is the nervous system. We got to pretty much pull out every nerve. You saw the brachial plexus, you saw the subcostalis nerve and where it's coming from, and we do tap blocks and all kinds of different blocks and stuff with CRNAs, and so it was really interesting to be able to physically cut the body open, remove the nerves or expose the nerves, dissect them out, and then take tests on them and have pins in that specific nerve and be like, oh yeah, that's the communicating sural or whatever. So it was very helpful to do that, and especially cardiac and pulmonary system and neurosystem, mammillary bodies in the brain and superior geniculus and all kinds of stuff. You'll learn more about the body than you ever thought you could in that class. It's a good experience, very hard, very long days, but it was memorable, and I was glad I had it. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot that in the summer, amidst all those difficult courses, of course they had to throw on an online hybrid class where we had to do APA-style papers every week, which included research and citations. And if you're coming into a doctoral CRNA program, go ahead and resign to the idea that your opinion matters as much as the research it's based off of. So don't ever say anything unless you're able to cite it with an APA-style correct format, because if it's the wrong format, it's also null and void, whatever you said. So, get really good at APA. Understand that your opinion only matters based off the peer-reviewed qualitative research article that you've got it from, and just get used to just pounding out research, because you will constantly do it all the time. You'll do it in your sleep. You'll be saying, randomized controlled trial this, and this research article cites that. So get ready for that coming into a doctoral CRNA program. And that might be a difference between a master's. I don't know. I haven't actually asked some of my friends that do the master's how much of the research they have to do. So that would be an interesting question for them. All right, guys. So that was my first year of CRNA school. I did orientation for clinicals a couple days ago at the local, not a local hospital. It's actually about an hour from here, but it's a really big facility, and I'm excited to go there. It's going to be a good experience. I met a bunch of the chief CRNAs and anesthesiologists, and they do tons of blocks and tons of cabbages and all kinds of different types of surgeries. So I'll get experience doing tons of stuff. It's very autonomous there, which is great. So I'm excited for that. That's the next wing of CRNA school. I'm a second year now officially. And so the second year in my program means you do 1 day a week on campus where they throw on a bunch of lecture material, which it'll be OB and Peds this fall, specific anesthesia OB and Peds. And then you do 3 days a week of clinicals. So it's heavier clinical based in the second year. And then your third year is pretty much a full-time job of just doing clinical rotations all week is your third year, with some online classes and preparing for boards and stuff. So anyway, I'm psyched to be at this phase in the program. I got to meet some of the first years that just came in 2 weeks ago. We got to have a dinner that we have annually at the school where they have kind of a fancy dinner. Everybody dresses up and you meet the new incoming class, and I got to meet some of you guys. Some of the viewers were some of the people in the crowd. So it was great to meet some of them, and who knows, maybe some of you guys that watch right now, maybe next year you'll be entering in and I'll get to shake your hand and meet you guys. So it's interesting how you meet people from the internet in real life. I actually kind of be interested in what you guys think if you are an anesthesia provider or are an anesthesia assistant or a CRNA or an anesthesiologist. Does this curriculum kind of line up with what you learned? Is there something different that we haven't covered yet that you learned right away? Or what do you guys think, and how was your education experience? And as nurses who are watching this, or wannabe nurses who are watching this that want to eventually go to CRNA school, what do you guys think about this information? Is this interesting to you? Do you feel like this kind of coursework is something that you want to sign up for? Let me know in the comments below, and let's bolt out.